This is after the Last Supper. This is during the time where they came and got Jesus, kidnapped him from a time of prayer, really. This is where Peter famously cuts off the ear of the Roman soldier and Jesus heals him. And before that, this Last Supper meal takes place, and Peter, the indignant one, Peter, the one that said, "No, Jesus, you can't wash my feet." You know, the same one that said, "I will never forsake you." The same one that Jesus said, "Listen, Peter, before the rooster crows 3 times, or before the rooster crows, you'll have denied me 3 times." Peter was like, "No, God, that's a wrong, maybe one of these guys, but me. I'm your main guy. This is Peter you're talking about. I'm the faithful one." What was he to say? "Oh, you're right, Jesus, I probably..." No, he understood this is not going to happen. So they've taken Jesus, they haul him off. He's in front of this regime of religion who are judging him based not on truth but on lies. And Peter, who's still along for the ride, is followed along, and he's looking through the doors and through the curtains, sitting at fires outside, keeping warm. And a little girl, well, let me read. Pick it up in Luke 22:55. Someone had built a fire, so Peter inched closer and sat down among them to stay warm. A girl noticed Peter sitting in the firelight, staring at him. She pointed him out and said, "This man is the one of Jesus' disciples." Peter flatly denied it, saying, "What are you talking about, girl? I don't know him." A little while later, someone else spotted Peter and said, "I recognize you. You're one of his. I know it." Peter said, No, I'm not one of his disciples." About an hour later, he's realizing, right? He's begun to deny. His fear, his anxiety is building upon as they're spitting on Jesus and pulling his hair. How could this happen? Once again, somebody recognized him, and once again he says, "I don't know the man." While the words were still in his mouth, the rooster crowed. And Scripture tells us that at that moment, the Lord, who was being led through the courtyard by his captors, turned around and gazed at Peter. All at once, Peter remembered the words Jesus had prophesied over him. "Before the rooster crows in the morning, you will have denied me 3 times, that you don't even know me." Peter burst into tears and ran off from the crowd and wept bitterly. What is it that took Peter, who had fully surrendered 3 years ago, who was willing to do anything for Jesus, who cut off the ear, was ready to fight thousands of soldiers? What happened to where he went from that person to the person who denies Jesus in his time of most need? His boy was up there, and he needed help. And what did Peter do? He denied him. He turned his head. I believe it was fear. I believe doubt began to set in. How could these things happen if he's really Jesus, if he's really the guy I thought he really was, and why would he allow this to happen to him? How would this happen to our lives? Who's watching out for us disciples now? This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This is Jesus. And he begins to question everything. Everything seems out of control. Everything seems out of control. It's the lack of control. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the reality that Jesus is seemingly powerless to the powers of the day. Kind of rings home to maybe some of you in the situation we're in right now. I want to read one more. John 21, 1 through 18. Later, this is after Jesus had reappeared, been resurrected. We read about Peter who hears from the ladies that the burial cloths were laid aside and Jesus wasn't in the tomb. He runs there. He runs down and is astonished and begins again to weep in awe of what is happening, what has transpired. Jesus is alive. Why did he run there? Why was there such an urgency? Because he hadn't been made right with Jesus yet. He denied him 3 times. And now he's gone, and what am I going to do? And I don't know how this transpires. In Luke 21, 1 through 18, it could have been anywhere from 2 weeks to 40 days. And within that period, Jesus had still not talked to Peter about this thing. They were still separate. They were still... So later, Jesus appeared once again to the group of disciples by the Lake Galilee, and happened one day while Peter, Thomas the twin, Nathanael, the group of them were out fishing. And when what happens is Peter says in his frustration, I'm going fishing. And a bunch of disciples go with him. And you got to get this scene. It's they're out there fishing. And what happens when the stuff that we put everything in, the basket that we believe for, when we've trusted God for everything and it doesn't work out, where it seems like everything is out of control, oftentimes we go back to what we used to do. We go back to our old life. And here we find Peter the fisherman, dejected, disconnected from the Father, disconnected from Jesus, worried and in shame. He goes back to the old Peter. He's fishing. And you got to get this scene. They're out there. They're not catching anything. Once again, they can't catch a stinking fish. And from the shore, they hear a voice. Hey, boys, you got anything for breakfast? No, we're not catching anything. Why don't you try on the other side of the boat? At what point do you think that they would have thought, hey, is that Jesus, right? But they don't. They just threw the net over. Once again, the fish, they just flock to that net like metal to a magnet. And one of the disciples in the boat says, is it Jesus? I think it's Jesus. And we see Peter puts on his clothes and jumps into the water towards Jesus. Doesn't wait for them to pull, but doesn't care. I need to get to him. I need to get to my Father. I need to get to Jesus. And it's weird. I know, it's weird. Who puts clothes on before they jump into a pool? Some people think maybe he thought he was going to walk on water because Jesus was calling to him. That's a cool story. I don't know. Regardless, he ends up on the shore. Peter and Jesus. And it had to be a little bit awkward for a season because they didn't confront the issue that was in the room. The elephant was still there. And the other guys get there. And Jesus, they have breakfast together. And Peter's sitting there. Oh, Jesus, I need to talk to you. But I need to get right with you, Jesus. I need to do this thing. And Jesus is like, pass the ketchup, right? And some while later, as they're finishing breakfast up, Jesus asked Peter 3 questions. Do you love me? Yes, I love you. Do you love me? Yes, Jesus, you know I love you. Do you love me? I love do anything for you, Jesus. Why did he ask him 3 times? I believe it's because Peter denied him 3 times. This is the same Peter who denied Jesus. This is the same Peter who trusted him. This is the same Peter who in months to come would walk and people in the presence of God be so heavy on. This is the Peter that preached, that grabbed the microphone in the chaos of Pentecost and preached the first gospel message, which led 3,000 Jewish people to become followers of Jesus Christ. I say all that to say, regardless of what stage you can relate to the stories of Peter's life and relationship with Jesus, you got to know Jesus is a God of comeback.